and welcome to another episode of Friendships That Flourish, the podcast, where we dive into the intricacies of building and nurturing meaningful connections that stand the test of time. Join us as we explore the dynamics of friendships, sharing inspiring stories, and uncovering actionable tips for fostering deeper and more fulfilling friendships. Today's episode, you have your host friend, Regina Nicole, here with my brother, my friend, my favorite DJ. I want to say MD. What would you like us to call you today?
I don't know, man. We call each other so many things.
Right.
Uncle M, MD, DJ
Okay.
Lemx. So
All right, so Uncle M, DJ. So I am super excited to have you on
Thank
the
you.
couch today. I've been anticipating our episode just because, like I shared with another friend, of like a lot of times we don't get to hear from men. Like there's a misconception that men don't have these same thoughts or conversations, and so I'm super excited to have you here so that we can hear your thoughts on this.
Cool. Thank you. I'm excited too.
Thank you. So today's episode, we're going to dive into the intricacies of friendships, or the intersections of friendships and love languages. How familiar are you with love languages?
Very much so. This is something that I had to learn, as it relates to my relationship, to my marriage, in the love languages. Even understanding that I have my own love languages. That was something I always thought it was, oh man, I don't care, man. It's whatever. But come to find out, I was like, man, I do have things that matter. And also being able to navigate the love languages of my wife and understanding hers, and not only being able to speak those languages, but also, being active in those languages as well.
Oh, nice, nice. So I'm excited because I am, like, first of all, I'm a bookworm. And so I really enjoy reading the book by Dr. Gary Chapman, The Five Love Languages. So I'm excited to discuss that. But I always get started with like a question that I ask everybody. And that question is, what does it mean to have a friendship that is flourishing for you?
So a friendship that is, when you think about flourishing, right? I always go back to, it reminds me of the word flower,
Mm,
and when you plant a flower, it starts off as a seed. Matter of fact, let's take your goddaughters, for instance, right? They have two flower pots that we got from a community event at the YMCA, right? One is growing or flourishing and the other one is not, right? But that doesn't mean that you're not continuously pouring into that friendship.
cool.
So they're both continuously pouring into the friendship. So now the one that's not growing, it's a small bud starting to slowly but surely coming along. So when I think about friendships that flourish, it's making sure that you're incorporating all the necessary components into the friendship to make sure that you can watch it grow.
Nice, nice. So I asked this question to some other guests. And so I have been trying to create like this word bank to the question. And so something that was shared previously was accountability, integrity, patience, grace. And actually, I added something recently, and I added forgiveness. And so, to your point about planting seeds and that type of thing, that's super cool. And it makes me, like, the wheels in my head turn to think about that. And like you said, like a flower. So I do not have a green thumb. My mom does.
Yeah,
And
neither do
so
I.
one of the things that my mom always talks about, first of all, her patio and porch looks like a jungle. And I'm like, why does this look like a jungle? But anyway, I was like, Mom, how does this happen? And she's like, Regina, you have to nurture
That's good.
when you're doing these things with a garden or plants. And I'm like, well, what does that look like? And so she's like, well, I talk to them. Or she's like, sometimes I just sit outside with them just to be amongst them so that they know that they're not alone. And I was like, hmm, because for me, I'm like, it's a plan. It'll take care of itself.
Right. So
Which is why
autopilot.
mine, right. But no, it makes me think, to your point about the flower, it makes me think about that in friendships. And so friendships that flourish, it does mean you nurture and you spend time, which leads me into the five love languages, right? So
Let's go.
yeah, so the five love languages, we have words of affirmation,
Mhm.
acts of service, quality time, physical touch, and receiving gifts.
Yep.
And so, like, initially, when I learned about five love languages, again, it was like, okay, this only applies to romantic relationships. But then I was like, no, it actually could apply to friendships.
Right.
And so, do you know your friendship love language? Like, is there a difference, or is like your love language? kind of
So
dual for
so
both.
I don't know what my, friendship love languages are,
Mhm.
because when you think about the love language in the relationships and then the ones in a friendship, they may be the same, but the way that they are displayed or portrayed gotta be different.
Right.
The way my physical touch would look like with my wife won't look the same with
Right,
you,
for sure.
But like if you come to the crib and I'm from afar, I say, "Hey, Regina," you already know something is off.
Right. I'm like, "Why are you
I was
calling me
like, "Wait,
Regina?"
he ain't come and giving, I ain't get no hug. He ain't calling me by my nickname." I'm just so that's when you look at that physical touch aspect of that, right?
Right.
But if my wife doesn't come home and we don't get an embrace, and I'm already my wheels are turning because one of my love languages in my relationships is physical touch.
Okay.
So if I come home, if I want to get an embrace, automatically I'm like, what I did. What's wrong?
Right.
So I've dived into my love languages for friendships. I think there's a lot of intentionality. Because in my mind, I don't like drama. I don't like the spaces of discomfort. So
Mm,
a lot of times, if somebody has done or is doing something, I kind of let it go unchecked because I don't like the discomfort of having a conversation. Hey, man, I really didn't like this. I
right.
kind of just pivot myself
Right.
because I don't want the negative that space of negativity to come in.
But it's important. So we're gonna come back to that. So
Okay.
don't let me forget. Tell me what your like. I know some people have like a primary and a secondary. So what are your
Mhm.
like top two love languages? Let's start there.
All right. So my top two. So first is words of affirmation
Okay.
and physical
And
touch.
physical touch. And so you mentioned that that looks different between like your relationship with your spouse and then your
Hmm.
relationships with others. So just thinking about what that could look like in a friendship,
Hmm.
what do you think that could look like to make sure that you are feeling supported and loved in your friendships?
So one of the things, right, especially with a friendship, I always want to be a crutch.
Mm.
We've had conversations in the past. I was like, hey man, I need to know. I need to know. I don't. I would be more upset if I'm not given an opportunity to to be a resource.
Okay.
Um, or to be trusted.
Right.
I don't want to be that I don't want to be that person in somebody's mind like, I don't know too much about him. I never want to be that person because I work hard, at maintaining character, maintaining my image, and then also being somebody who's going to be a pillar for someone,
Mm.
somebody, I believe in. So rapper Jadakiss, right? He says, one hand washes the other, but both wash the face. So
Period.
that's a mantra that I live by.
Mhm.
Everybody can help each other, and then we can all come together and help one another
One
as a
another.
whole.
Nice. Okay, so I'm gonna share my primary and my secondary. Yesterday, someone asked me my top three. But anyway, so for me, quality time and acts of service.
Mm,
However, acts of service can definitely supersede quality time in terms of like, because for me, I'm like, I have so many commitments and responsibilities.
mhm,
And so one of the things that really bothers me is if someone is like, "You're too busy," or "Why do you have these commitments?" And I'm like, "But these are things that I value, which is why I
mhm.
invest this way." But to really help me is like, okay, how can I help her tackle some of these responsibilities, right?
Gotcha.
Not take them over, but how do I support her with what that looks like? And so for me, really, something that I have been guilty of is like in friendships, not asking for help,
Mm,
which could then because of the way that I think about acts of service, then it could show up and I could like not spend time, the quality time with friends because I'm like, I have so many things going on. So I have to
mhm,
like not make it task driven or connected to some level of responsibility. But yeah, for me, it would be quality time and acts of service. I like gifts. And I mean, I like all of the things. I'm going to tell you a funny story. So I was sitting in a room with a friend and she could tell something was wrong with me. And
mhm,
so as she walked over and approached me, my heart started beating really fast.
mhm.
And she saw the shift in my face and she's like, "Are you okay?" And when she came over and like embraced me because I because I felt like I wasn't prepared. I wasn't
Oh
like
Lord.
oh yeah.
Did you hit it with a
No, but I started like crying and my heart started, I was
Ah.
like, wait. And she was like, what just happened? I was like, well, you kind of walked up on me. She was like, Regina. I was like, you gotta kind of let me usher into, like,
Hit it
let
with a
me initiate
hit
the
it with a
hug.
stranger danger response.
Right. But like I say, for quality time, that's important for me. And so
Mhm.
being like, sometimes it doesn't have to be that we have to do a whole lot. It's just us hanging out and like you like for me, sometimes it's literally I'm in a space, you're doing something and I'm doing something. Some of my
Mhm.
best friendships is when we're both on our computers, multitasking and having conversations, or we're like working and we're quiet, but we're in the same space. Which is probably really
Mm.
weird for people to hear.
That's not Ethel and Gretchen.
No.
No, that's
But
not.
I think I've also learned to push myself to that point about like
Mhm.
friendships is like pushing myself outside of a comfort zone. And we've talked about this. Like, I'm like,
Mhm.
you got to give me some time,
Right,
because you're
that's
like, and I'm like, give me some time because I'm not used to
right.
having that level of support in
And
a
it's crazy
friendship
that you
from
say that.
male.
And it's crazy that you say that, that I've had to learn to have to respect that from you.
I appreciate
Give me
it.
some time. Cause in my head, I'm like, man, I'm here. What you need?
Right,
What we
right.
doing? Who did it, where and why? What do I
Right.
what's the next move?
Right.
So I can be very much a man who bombards.
Okay.
But it's always, because I'm so passionate.
Yes,
One of the
passion.
and it's funny we talk about, like love language and relationships and friendships. I even think about like love languages at work, in the
Mhm.
workplace, right? One of the stigmas that I hate that they put on men, especially out in the workplace, they're too emotional.
Mm.
They're too emotional. Like if I don't have a space where I can be expressive and anticipate empathy,
Mm.
then where else can I do that?
Right.
So you talk about, acts of service, that is one I struggle with.
Tell me more.
So tell me more.
So when you say you struggle with it, is this from a friendship standpoint or just in
From
general?
friendship standpoint and relationship standpoint, because
Okay.
I tend to navigate to where I think my actions are needed,
Oh, okay.
as opposed to actually taking in the way or the things that are needed and then
Mhm.
moving in that direction. Because in my mind, I'm like, well, if I done did this, that, and the third,
You good.
is and that, of that, I felt that there's some value there.
Right.
But if this, that, and the third wasn't the expected act of service,
Mhm.
then I'm like, well, then I done did nothing now. So, sometimes I'll be looking I get frustrated because I'm like, hey, do these other three things matter? And then I had to reverberate like, those aren't the three things you need.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes me my wheels are turning to think about like, so in friendship, right? So you mentioned like you kind of get frustrated because you're like, well, I anticipated that this is what you needed,
Mm-hmm.
but you needed something else. And so I always say that conversation is key.
Right.
Like I feel like conversation starts with the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least if you don't have an answer, it provokes some deep thought, some deep diving and thinking for the individual. And so in your own experiences with friendships in general, what has been your experience with different friends of like, how do you, so like anticipating their needs and how they want to be received and expressed through the friendship through based off of the love languages? How do you, like, what do you do to make sure that you're like being proactive about that?
I encourage conversations.
Okay.
But especially when you talk about like male to male, a lot of times, so my diamond always says that you need more friends, you need more friends. I was like, man, my circle, my village
Mhm.
is who I consider more friends. But I do have, one homeboy that we went to high school with and we've kept in contact with, So one of the things a long time ago, I found myself always giving him advice and trying to, hey man, you should do this, you should do that. So one day he actually had a conversation. He said, hey man, sometimes all I need is a listening ear. I was like, well, I'm glad you said that because I'm
Right.
pulling out nuggets and you don't want to hear my nuggets. You just want me to shut my mouth and listen.
Right,
I was
right.
like, okay, I can do that. So I've done that more, but it goes back to again, communication and
Mhm.
conversation, because in my mind, again, I'm giving you what I think you need,
Right.
but it's not what you needed
Yeah.
until he says something.
Right. So how did you receive it though?
I received it well because one of the things that was frustrating, I was like, man, I keep giving you like these good advices and good tips, but you're not following anything.
You're like, yo, what's
I was like,
up?
what's up, man? I'm giving you good stuff here, man. I was like, this is how you should move. This is what you should do. So I would get frustrated because I was like, man, either what I'm telling you isn't working or you're not listening. But then when he told me that, I was like, oh, I was like, okay, well, I could take my feelings out of the equation because it's not what you needed from me.
Mhm.
You just want me to hear you. So now what we do is I was like, hey, let me ask you this. Do you want my opinion on things?
Yeah.
He'll either say yes or he'll say
Say
no.
no. Yeah, that's a good point. I think about how oftentimes we could tend to be fixers or we
Mm,
could tend to be so I have this thing where you're either a problem solver or it's another word now I can't think of it, but it was really good, y'all, I promise. So I just have this thing where, it takes a lot of, we talk about being safe, right? You hear
mhm,
people talk about, okay, create a safe space or whatever, but someone told me recently they was like, safe space, yes, but it may never exist in certain arenas. They're like,
mm,
you have to be brave enough to be able to go to a space with a person, even if it's uncomfortable. And so you talked about like how I don't like drama. I don't like, things to be tense and that type of thing. And
mhm,
I think a part of us growing together as individuals and really nurturing friendships is going to require us to be brave, to
mm.
be like, you know what? I appreciate all of your efforts. But there's this one thing that if you did this one thing, like if you just called me once a week if you could, or sent me a
Mhm,
text, that means so much more. And I had to learn that for myself just with how I showed up for myself. So
mm.
I feel like I show up very well for others, but the way that I show up for myself and have the ability to articulate that to nurture my own love languages that are important to me because like you said, like I'm giving you all of these good nuggets, like I'm giving you
Mhm.
my best stuff. I don't research the stuff. I don't wrote a
Right,
little mini series on it and I'm
right.
holding it, putting it in the
I'm
archive for
out here
you.
doctor feeling it.
Right. And you just kind of, and so I have taken this stance recently with a friend of mine where they'll ask me like, can you have any feedback? And I'm like, no. Not that I don't, but I'm
Mhm.
like, in this moment, you don't need more feedback. What you need is to sit with yourself and hear yourself talk this out loud.
Have you told her this?
I have.
Has she listened?
Sometimes. But for me, it's never like, so again, the way that I'm measuring success in that relationship, for me, is more about like seeing that person evolve into a
Mhm.
healthier person. And a lot of times a person being healthy has nothing to do with me solving their problems.
It's funny that you say that because it's crazy that you because again, I have now that you didn't use the word, I'm gonna go ahead and coin it now. So I have fixer syndrome. You
Mm.
know, if I feel like I have the ability to fix it,
Mhm.
then I push that agenda,
Mm.
but just because I can fix it
Right.
doesn't mean that you'll understand my way of fixing it
Mhm.
in order for you to apply it to you.
Yeah,
Um, so, again, it goes back to, being able to have those healthy conversations and understanding what people need, understanding the seeds they want you to plant as opposed to you just planting a random garden.
for sure. Yeah, I also think that love languages change for people like in
Hmm,
different seasons and times of their life.
for
And
sure.
so there was a time where like receiving gifts was a big deal for me when I think about it, right? And I
I've
remember
never been that. I'm like,
no, so let me tell you, I'm gonna tell y'all this story. I was a bad person when I did this. So I had a friend. I'm very big on birthdays. Usually now for over the last few years when I celebrate my birthday, it is really it does my heart good when I bring people together. Yes, it's for my birthday, but when people can come together, be in a space and
hmm,
really enjoy each other. Like we don't have to fuss and fight nobody aside. I like we're all comfortable. And so that's
hmm.
really helpful for me when I'm like, we're here to celebrate my birthday, but you all are all comfortable, which is why I'm usually working the room. And so I remember a friend of mine, she's like, hey, this year I got you X, Y, and Z. She was very thoughtful in her gift. But I was like, I deserve better.
This is before, right?
like,
Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure.
and I did. I felt like I had shown up in this
Hmm,
friendship more ways than one, like been a
hmm.
superstar. And I'm like, this is what you've had this whole time to prepare. And this is it?
So you didn't want the name keychain. Got it.
I'm not gonna say what it was. It was not a name keychain. And you know what's so side note? What's so crazy about the name keychain? You usually can't find Regina anywhere. Not a card tag, a mug, nothing. So
yeah, try finding Magdar.
Listen, right? So you got to get it custom made, and then they want to charge you an extra $20 on top of whatever the base rate. But anyway, so like I was really upset about this, and the friend didn't send me the gift.
Oh.
So after a while, because I'm like, where's my gift? And there she's like, mm-mm. She's like, you ridiculed me. You like read me to filth about this gift. And then you go ask me where it is a week later. She was like, yeah, absolutely not. She ended up keeping the gift. And so after like a few months, I went to visit her and I saw the gifts it was a whole set of things, but it was in the bottom of her closet in a box. I took the stuff.
Wait.
I was like, you still have my gift? She was like, yeah. And here's the thing. The gift, this person like we spent a lot of time together back in the day. And so this person knows that this is a thing that I absolutely love. So then in hindsight, when I think about it now, I'm like, Regina, you really showed your behind about this gift. And there was a better way for me to articulate my sentiments about it. And so I was like, yeah, I didn't do that right.
Right. Just
needless to say, me and this person don't exchange birthday gifts anymore.
Right. After you went to the girl house and committed robbery.
No. Well, she knew I took them because I was like, I'm taking my stuff. She was like, okay, but she was like, you didn't even want them. And I'm like, well, no, that's not the case. But again, speaking to my love language at the time, I did have a certain outlook on what receiving gifts look like. Like I had a list. And obviously that has definitely changed over time, not because I don't like gifts, but because the things that I value, and I say this all the time to people in conversation, I'm like, the things that you value navigate the decisions you make in life. I haven't wrote this, I haven't coined this, but I truly believe that. And in that space of life, I enjoy gifts, a certain type of gifts.
Right.
And so I'm like, this ain't it. Like there needs to be extra. So anyway, I don't feel the same way anymore.
Yeah, giving is I've never, if I get them, I get not like the qualitative aspect of friendships and relationship is so much more like if I don't get anything, but we good, like we 100, 10 toes down, then I'm good.
So you said that one of your love languages was words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation.
So how does that show up in friendship? What is it that you desire or expect?
So for me, I need to know that I'm showing up at the right time and at the right place in the right form and fashion.
Okay.
Because I don't want to always try to guess, hey, am I doing this right? Tell me if I'm doing it right. Tell me if I'm doing it wrong so that I can get it right so you can tell me I'm doing it right. And also, when you talk about some like words of affirmation, man, I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you for doing that. Oh, I know you'll be there for this. I like to hear the things, man, D, you've been there for me since you A1 since day one.
Right.
I was like, let me know that I'm doing a good job, that I'm navigating this friendship adequately.
So let's say currently, do you feel like you receive that support?
Oh, yeah.
From your, okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Good. And so receiving that support, like, do you share with the individual, like, hey, thank you so much. That really meant a lot that you, acknowledge X, Y, and Z.
I think I could definitely do a better job at being more frequent,
Okay.
That same expectation that I have, I need to make sure that I'm reciprocating it as well.
Very good. We're going to hold you accountable, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've explored our personal love languages. So I want us to talk a little bit about each one of like what that looks like in friendship, because again, a lot of times people only coin love languages for romantic relationships. And so let's try to coin what that looks like each one. Okay, we're gonna do this together.
10-4, let's do it.
All right, so we're gonna start with. You ever heard of start with the end in mind? Oh, okay, so it's another book. We'll talk about it on another podcast. All right, so Dr. Chapman, Gary Chapman is the author of The 5 Love Languages. And so I'm going to start with physical touch, simply because that's usually very touchy for people to talk about.
No pun intended.
So we're going to start with that one first of what that could look like in friendship, right? Because we live in a society where we over-sexualize things and then we make everything inappropriate.
Right,
Like
right.
everything is inappropriate.
Right, right, right.
So like let's try to like dive into what that could look like. And so I'm gonna let you go first.
All
What do
right.
you think physical touch in friendship looks like? Whether it's same sex, heterosexual, like what does that look like?
So you think about like, especially like in the black community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if when two guys see each other, the pound, the dap, or if it's a family member, must give you a little quick bam, a little quick hug, I think that's important, when we talk about like male and female. I come from so I'm Haitian,
Okay.
French, Haitian, Canadian. So when as families, as a culture, when we see each other to the female, it's usually like a kiss on each cheek.
Oh, nice.
That's something that we do, so whether it's a stranger or you always do it. And so I think that's in friendships, you know, I do it all the time, hey,
Right,
um,
right, right.
because that's just, so if like I mentioned earlier, if you come over to the house and, I'm just sitting on the couch and I'm like, hey, what's up? I'm like, hey, you didn't get up, I ain't get a high five. Like, what I ain't get a high five or
Right.
nothing, then what's wrong? So I
Right.
think that, those it doesn't have to be, like a hey, what's up, and I'm tapping you on your behind.
Right.
that like
Inappropriate.
it's inappropriate. It's inappropriate, so it's not that's not time for that physical touch,
Right.
and also, respecting like boundaries,
Mhm.
so that's important.
So it's crazy you started with that because I was gonna say the same thing about like having a special like handshake or a
Hmm.
dap or something of that sort. So no, that's pretty cool that we kind of was on the same line.
We dope like that.
Right. I always think about hugs. So a lot of my male cousins, I am younger than
Hmm.
all of them, most of them rather, or the ones that I see frequently. And a lot of times they embrace me all the time. And
Hmm.
I'll be like, hello. Cause I just told you about the incident where the young lady was trying to check
Right,
on
right,
me
right.
and I had a whole panic attack. I had a whole panic attack. But no, they all embrace me. And it makes me feel like when they do that, even though I have to like usher myself into it over time, has made me feel close to them.
Hmm.
Simply because like I am the youngest child. And so a lot of times when I'm with this group of cousins, I've often felt like alone because my parents aren't
Hmm.
together. And so my mom doesn't come to these events and my sister doesn't. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm here and I gotta like
Hmm.
navigate this room by myself. But my cousins, my male cousins specifically, they will usually embrace me. My female cousins, yeah, that's like an easy thing. Like, hey girl, what's up? Type thing. And
Hmm.
so hugs is I'm a hugger.
Hmm.
Most people that probably don't know that, but I'm a hugger. So I enjoy the embrace because it's a part of like being affirmed, I guess I would say.
Absolutely.
So like the handshakes, the special dabs or whatever, and then hugs. Anything else you could think of? Oh, you talked
Hmm.
about the kissing on the cheek. So
Right
that's a
there. Yeah.
cultural thing. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's real because when you get to, especially like for like the elders,
Uh-huh.
like if you don't come and you don't come embrace, it's like a form of disrespect. Like,
Oh
oh, there
wow.
must be a problem.
Yeah, that's important to know
Hmm.
because having friends of like a different culture or different
Hmm.
nationality and things like those things are not always talked about in the forefront.
Correct.
And so people then go through this friendship and they're like, I didn't know these things mattered to you because no one
Yeah,
brought it
oh yeah,
up.
that's especially in the Haitian community. Like like when you come into the house, and we've been there. When you come into the house and there's a whole bunch of people, you got to go to everybody.
Oh wow, yes. I'm like,
Yeah.
come on, y'all.
You
I
got to
said,
go
hey,
to
everybody, and it's
nah.
like, you didn't come,
You can't do no generalized. Hey,
huh? Right,
nah.
they're offended.
Oh yeah, big time.
Okay, let's see. So we have physical touch, words of affirmation,
Those
which
are important in friendship. Like
words, yeah.
especially like I think I need to know that I'm being the friend you need me to be.
That's
Um,
important.
yeah, that's important, because me just thinking that I'm I here being the best friend that I can be, and I'm missing all the marks.
Definitely
You
missing the marks.
missing the marks. I want to be on bullseye.
Yeah, so let's see. Words of affirmation, something that I have learned, and I learned this through a friend or a student, can't remember. So there was this time I was working, and we used to have this student in the class who would always say, thank you for sharing. Like after you shared,
Hmm.
And so I have picked that up. And me and some friends, we chuckle at when I do
Right.
it, but I do it because it does affirm. I think especially in spaces where we're trying to be as vulnerable as we can, I think it is important to let the person know I see you. And like, hey, I don't, because a lot of times we go into conversations where we always feel like we have to have an answer. And it's like, no, I just want to be able to talk about this out loud. And so depending on the topic or what you're sharing, it could be like, you know what, I see you. Or like, thank you for sharing that with me because I know that that was difficult for you to share.
That explains a lot then. So now I know.
What?
Now I know. So I'm going to be listening. I'm going to have listening out to that. It was thank you for sharing. What's the other one? Tell me more.
Tell me more.
Or what was the other one?
So
how did that make you feel?
Well, yeah, because we do this like, how was your day? Right? And we instantly like, oh, it was good. And we keep moving. But friends who have really invested or pay attention are like, it's like, you
Something
know,
else is up.
Yeah, they can look at you and tell like, okay, today there's a different tone in your voice. Or like, I noticed that such and such happened on Sunday. And I'm just circling back to like, how are you feeling about what happened? And I think that's a form of affirming and words of affirmation because you're checking in. So you hear people,
good.
Yeah, you know,
Checking
like
in.
being able to check in. And again, we get busy. The responsibility levels for people are different. And so sometimes we do drop the ball, but I think that there's a space for that as well. I think we have to be accountable to like, you know what, I dropped the ball. But there's a level of that grace of how we're going to be able to flourish with being able to be like, you know what, I totally, like, I know you had an appointment, have a friend where like, she understands my challenges with going to the doctor. And so it's like the day before, the day of, probably the night of, and the day after is like, how are you feeling? Like, you know, that type of thing. And so that is very helpful for me. And I appreciate it because it's affirming and kind of giving me this level of affirmation to know that I'm not doing it alone.
Right, absolutely.
So those are good. Any more to words of affirmation of how we can kind of...
No, so I think like when you say words of affirmation, I think it's there's a level of integrity that is needed there. And again, like be totally honest, like for instance, like you just mentioned, being able to see somebody and be like, nah, there's something else. There are layers there, and then diving deeper, because sometimes that deeper dive is what somebody needs to be like, well, you know what? Today was not good. My boss pissed me off.
Right. So this is what I thought about when you were talking. So another form of words of affirmation, and again, you could disagree with me here.
Okay.
But I also think about like something, the avenue that people don't want to talk about, which is like we disagree on something, right? Or you have to check me. So I talked about how you were there. So situation where I'm talking to my dad on the phone and you kind of witnessed the whole thing. You didn't really have anything to say initially. But then my friend is like, listen, like, what is this? Like, and she checked me on it. And so I feel like that is also, it doesn't come off as affirming, right? Because we connected to feelings. Like it didn't make me feel good that I got quote unquote in trouble.
Right.
But I think for the greater good of who I am as a person, because the only way friendships flourish is if both people are flourishing in their own way. So it was a learning space for me to be like, you're right. Like all I could do is just sit there and look.
And I know exactly what you're talking about.
I wanted to bawl out my eyes, right? Because I felt very validated in why I was responding to the call that way. But there's a bigger part of myself where I'm like, Regina, you could do this differently. And so I think affirming is being able to also receive, I don't say constructive criticism, I call it feedback, like constructive feedback of like, come on, let's do this differently.
So there's a space where there's got to be like comfort to address or to provide a specific type of feedback. Because even in this situation, right, there are so many dynamics around that. So you got to kind of ask yourself as a parent, like, do I want to take the risk and provide feedback?
Right.
Because I don't know how it's going to be received. I might be told no. And then now I got to come back into my corner and be like, okay, this wasn't the time. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think you got to definitely take leaps of faith when it comes to, providing feedback or, for lack of a better term, checking your friends, when they're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I had to learn how to do, not to check, but to receive the check.
Yes, be checked.
Right. You checked me a couple months ago and I was tight for a little bit.
Right. Let's talk about
I was
it.
tight for a
Let's
little
bring
bit.
it to
But
the
you were
table.
right. But you were right.
Okay.
You were right.
Do you want to share?
No, we ain't gonna go
Oh,
there.
okay. But yeah, like I think even in that, like being
That
able
was when he was
to
on our way to St. Augustine.
being able to
Right.
circle back with like, like being able to come back, because sometimes, it takes a lot of energy and time to be able to have difficult conversations or not. And like, even to be able to say, like, I really appreciate you showing up for me can take a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I don't want to do it, but because I'm learning to do that in that space, because for a long time, like before you and I became close, I didn't, I wasn't challenged to do it.
Right.
I'll say that. And so that is definitely a learning space for me. Okay, so we did physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time. Let's jump into quality time. So what does that look like? And then like, we're giving out some tips so people can think about this.
So I think one of the things about quality times as it relates to friendship, it doesn't have to be we're face to face or we're going somewhere. It could be a phone call, a text message, a handwritten letter that was put in the mail, when you talk about some quality time, are we, when we're sitting down, we're having conversations, are we just shooting the breeze, or we're actually, providing some substance into the friendship during that quality time? And again, I think when it comes to quality time, there has to be a space where we're both allowing each other to be organic, and it has to be natural.
For sure.
It can't be forced.
Right, for sure. Very good feedback. I think I will add to that quality time. So having an expectation sometimes can be tricky when you've not communicated what that expectation is. So being communicative about it, right? Like a lot of times people don't know to ask, like, people don't know to check in.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So,
that's good. Checking in.
Yeah. So a lot of times people are like, yo, I didn't know I should have asked. Like, we talk, or kind of like, oh, I see this person when I see the person, right? And the other person could be like, yo, like, I noticed that Regina spends time with this person. Why haven't they spent that kind of time with me? And so I think checking in is important, because in friendships, people will say stuff like, well, I know you're busy. I've been told that. I know you're busy and you're navigating a lot. And I've told people, I'm like, I'm always busy. My phone I'm always on the phone. I have to be on the phone for work. If you don't call me because you've created all of these things in your mind, that is on you.
And it's funny that you mention that, because, when we talk about quality, like, for instance, let's take my brother-in-law, for instance, right? When we're together, oh, that's my brother. We
right.
But we're now getting to a place where we're conversing with each other. It's like, hey man, we need to. Why the girls always hanging out? That's what it's like. How come the girls always hanging out, but we don't? I was like, you know what, you're right. So we did have a time when we went and we hung out. And I was like, man, this is different. This is different, because now it's just us being able to add some equity into our relationship, our friendship, our familyship, our brotherhood. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, because women, we're going to get our stuff. Like, we're going to have brunch. We're going to have dinner parties.
Don't make me pull out my calendar.
We're going to have lunch dates. We're like, hey, girl, I'm going to the store to get these shoes. Come with me so you can see.
Networking events.
Yeah, so.
Teach and learn.
Women do it all the time. We could do a better job of the quality of it, because a lot of times you find women who, they're always doing whatever. There's no quality. Because I've talked to women who still feel like I get quality time. I get time, but the time isn't quality. And so I think that is important. But even like, I will say for me, an area of growth is trying to figure out how to navigate the quality time between myself and my male friends. A lot of my male friends are connected to wives or girlfriends. That is how I met them. And the women have ushered me into these friendships. Like, hey, if you need anything, let him know, because he he could do it for you. He's the muscle. And that's challenging for me, though. It's challenging for me because I'm trying to navigate it in a way that I feel like is appropriate.
It's a thin line.
And I want to make sure, because at the end of the day,
the day gotta end.
I just want to make sure, like, I'm doing things right. And I can't say that
Mhm.
that is like something that I should even have to think about, but it is something, to be honest, it is something that I do navigate.
So when we talk about that, right? So I
Mhm.
think that there's a level of responsibility
Mhm.
on the receiving end, right?
Okay.
Like if you call me, be like, "Hey, Uncle M, I got this new bookshelf that I need put up, uh, or I got this door and I don't know what to do. Can you help?" I was like, "Sure, right." I can't just show up and ain't said nothing to Diamond.
Correct.
I just
Correct.
can't show up like, "Hey, going to Gigi's. You want to roll through? Bring the girls. I got to do some work over there."
Mhm.
There's responsibility. There's levels. There's check marks
Right.
that you have to meet in order for that, And then also, you have to look at the level of comfort that was presented. Like for instance, right? You say these relationships were brought on because they're part of a female friendship that is
Mhm.
connected to you, right? But then you're looking at the value of that friendship is, right? Or whether or not that other female's like, well, because you got some who be like, oh no, you can't just call him.
Right, right, right. Yeah, well,
Y-
that's why, like, for me, I check in with the wife first.
mhm,
Hey, what do you think about, or such and such and such? Or sometimes I am just talking to her about something, and she's like, "Oh, that's a Uncle M thing. Like
mhm,
he could give you all," and I'm like, "Okay, cool." And that has helped me. So I can say that that has helped me. Like I said, I have other friends who are married or in like long-term relationships, and they're always like, "What you gotta get? Okay, tell them." And I'm like, okay, but proximity and then just kind of like me navigating, okay, like how do I do this to make sure that I've covered all my bases?
mhm.
So that's good. Thank you. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
All right, so words of affirmation, quality time,
We did
uh,
physical touch,
we did physical touch, and then receiving gifts.
receiving gifts.
Receiving gifts and friendships. Again, I think it still starts with a conversation, but,
Hmm.
or not a but however, I do believe that some of that receiving gifts is gonna help when you are in tune with the other person, male or
Right.
female,
Facts.
because if a person knows that I like photos, or a person knows that I like keepsakes or whatever, like Regina likes to go out and eat because I don't cook, then they're like, oh, okay, we're gonna give her a gift card, or Regina likes X, Y, and Z. Knowing that, and you know this by like either asking and confirming and spending time, I think investing and spending time with a
Mhm.
person. So I think that that is like very important, because some people are like, yeah, you brought me all these gifts, but I never see you. And
Mm.
I'm like, oh, I didn't like, because I have been like, I'm a person where, again, people are like, you're always so busy. And I'm like, okay, just call me. Like, if you need something,
Mhm.
call me, because I am busy.
Right, right.
However, it's like, if I'm not like, the gift, because a gift is not just like something that I buy. The
Mhm.
gift could be the gift of time, or the gift of like whatever. It could be something different. So I think being able to kind of assess that from the person, like, okay.
Mhm. And I think one of the things when you talk about some like gift giving, you gotta again those conversations. Because I used to be bad at it. I used to be like, "Oh, this is nice. She'll like that. Oh, I think this is a great idea." And then I get there, it was like, "I didn't ask you for a deep fryer. Like, why would you buy me that?"
Yes, deep fried.
I said, "Don't buy me no household gift."
Right, right, right. But yeah, I think, again, like in friendships though, being able to say that
Hmm.
without being brave, without feeling like, oh my gosh, they're gonna tear me down. Don't do it the way I did the friend about my birthday.
Right now, because so I used to be offended. I'm like, "Yo, man, I done spent time, money, brain cells
You was
into
working
picking
hard.
and into picking out these gifts, and for you not to like it, I'm like, you're so ungrateful." But then I had to learn
Right.
that I was like, man, that's not what they want. And also being again, when you talk about some being in tune with the person,
Hmm.
I had to listen. So now I keep notes.
Right.
Oh, I like this. I go to my notes.
Yes, you got sticky notes, and you got,
I got
virtual.
virtual. Yeah, I don't know sticky notes. I listen.
Yeah.
I'm very much a technology buff. So I'm like, we're gonna do a keep notes, share. Hey, I need you to make a list or something. But again, knowing who the individual is and knowing the do's and the don'ts, like I don't care for cards. I bet
Mm.
you didn't know that.
I didn't.
So I don't care for cards because they just end up after the season or
In
whatever
the
that time.
trash.
They no, they end up
Oh,
in the box. Like we
in a
got this
box.
shoe
Oh, okay.
box full of
Full of cards,
cards.
really? Why not shred them?
Full of cards. Because then I feel like I'm being ungrateful for
Oh
shredding the card.
no.
I was
Now
like,
I keep cards and I love sending mail and I love it. So yeah,
right, because you'll
okay.
go back and you'll read the cards.
Will.
I'm like, look, friend. It's a
You
shoe.
like them $5 could
I was like, this
have
shoebox here. I like back in the days they had e-cards. You could say e-cards.
Okay, so let me say this. Let me ask this question. What are your thoughts about, like, for example, you're like, I don't like cards because they're going to just, after the season, we collect them in a box. Is there ever a time in a friendship where it is okay to stretch yourself? I don't know if that's what we call it, but that's what comes to mind. Is it okay to stretch yourself in a way that says, like, this may not be my thing, but I can happily accept this, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do agree because because at the end of the day, I still don't never want to show a place of lack of gratitude. Because I want to make sure that I'm putting your feelings and the actions that you've taken to provide me with the gift in consideration first prior to mine.
Okay.
That to me, that's more important.
Okay.
I may not want a card,
Right.
but you put thought and efforts into a card.
Okay.
And for me to actually be appreciative of that, that's more important to me than actually me not liking cards.
Okay, so yours was physical touch. And what was the other one?
Words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation. Okay. No more cards. Got it.
But I like the letters. The letters are cool.
The letters. Okay.
The letters are cool.
Okay, this has been great. Do you have any final thoughts or tips or anything?
We did all five. I thought it was
Wait a minute. We did receiving gifts.
quality time, words of affirmation.
Acts of service.
Acts of service.
Acts of service. Okay, so acts of service, love it, love it, love it. So I think in friendship, like one time, so for me, recently I had to move again. And it really meant a lot for me, for you and Diamond to be with me on this entire journey every time I've moved, right? It's less about like, do you need a bed? I don't care about that. Like the fact that I didn't have to do this by myself. And I won't say I don't care about that because that could come off rough. What I'm saying is it was very important and pivotal for me because this thought that I had to do, here's one more thing I got to do it by myself. And so I appreciate that. And so when you think about acts of the service, like sometimes that could be hard for people because they're like, well, you do everything or and I'm like, no, like if I'm doing something and you're like, hey, let me bring you something to eat because I know you don't have time to leave this space because you're navigating this. That is an act of service that has one less task or one less level of responsibility that you've taken off of my plate. So
right, but see, and this is why when I mentioned when we first started, acts of service is the toughest one for me because there's so many layers to one act of service.
For sure,
just like you mentioned here, right? Hey, I'm gonna bring you lunch because I know you got X, Y, and Z. I actually have to be intentional at thinking of the X, Y, and Z so that I can perform the proper act of service.
Well, I think so. Yes, I agree that there's a level of truth to that. But I think I will encourage you that like it's not all things for all people. Like there are layers to me as an individual, right? But some other people are like, whatever, it's fine.
No, man. So, for instance, this morning, right? I knew that I had to be here at a certain time. So the missus went for a walk with the girls. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to come back and I got to go. I'm going to take the car to the car wash. They just got back in town yesterday. And so now, in my mind, I'm like, okay, shit, I'm going to be gone. She's going to be here with the girls. They want to cook breakfast. The kitchen is a mess. We just got back from out of town. We got luggage in the middle of the living room floor. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, boom. Act of service. House need to be ready before I leave.
Right.
See the thought pattern into all of that?
Yeah. So I could see how that could be a lot.
Right.
I could see how that could be like, okay, let me.
Because some people it's natural.
Yeah.
It's second nature.
Yeah.
But for me, I actually have to intentionally be like, put those pieces of the puzzle. It's like a game of chess. It's just like, you ever play chess?
But why is it? No. But why is it so, why do you feel like it's like so intense?
Because I don't want to miss the mark.
Okay, but you got to give yourself grace.
So it's funny. A lot of people keep saying, give yourself grace, but when we're talking about act of service, right? The act of service, again,
You gotta try though.
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give myself grace, but at the same time, I don't want to miss the mark. I don't want to disappoint. I don't want to not be able to provide the necessary fulfillment.
Right.
Because if that's your, especially if it's your top love language, if it's your top love language, I gotta ace it.
Well, so missing the mark, and this is why it's important to have conversation because and to build rapport with people because missing the mark for me is not trying at all, as opposed to I did try.
Mm,
Are there times where you like, I already gave it to you, like, here's what it is, and you still like, how did
mhm,
you do that? Yeah, we do have those moments because we're human. But I think missing the mark, a lot of times it's because we don't even try.
mm.
It's because we've talked ourselves out of it.
Right,
Like,
right,
we're like,
right.
okay, I'm gonna do this. But then we may say, you know what, it's easier to just not do it because I may
Mhm,
jack it up. And I'm like, well, what do you have to measure it by? Because then that creates experience,
mm.
that's a part of seeding, like sowing into a seed to see it grow. And so if you never try, then you remove the opportunity to water the friendship.
So what you're saying is there's value in the acts, the attempts of acts
Yes.
of service as opposed to fully fulfilling.
Yes. So I'm going to use the analogy of like driving a car.
Okay.
So for people who've never driven a car, they've never gotten behind the wheel. And so we measure it as like, okay, the success of this is that you get in the car, you crank it up, you know the gears, you know what shifts to move, and you drive from this point to the next point safely without accident. That puts a lot of pressure on a person because everybody don't see it the same and they don't get it the same and everybody's experience is different. But if today you said, "Come on, Gigi, I know you want to learn how to drive." And so you take me, I go get in the car. You show me how to unlock the door with the key fob because the last time I saw a car, everything you did it with your finger. And now I'm like, okay, you have this whole fob, right? So I unlock the car door, I get in the car on the driver's side. And let's say I sit there for 15 minutes crying because I'm like having a panic attack. And then after 15 minutes, I'm like, this is as far as I can go. I tried.
Okay.
If you have the time, capacity, and the strength, it may take 7 whole days for me
Right.
to actually go to the car, get in the car until eventually I go to the car, crank it up,
Right.
and drive it. I may not drive it from point A to point B. I may actually pull out of the driveway and then back up.
I think one thing about acts of service, it takes you an individual to have selflessness because
Mm,
especially if somebody has painted the picture and has provided the expectation, you got to take yourself out of the equation. You're like, if you know that this is what's expected, whether it's in friendship or relationship, if you know that's the acts of service that individuals want, if they're asking for, because you think about right, because some of the love language they even cross intersect.
mhm.
If you're thinking quality time and acts of service is one thing, me picking up the phone and providing the call is not is giving a call is checking off two boxes at once.
Mhm.
So you got to think even deeper into that. How can I cross intersect the love languages? To meet the expectation, meet or exceed the expectation.
Yeah, I think seeing them as partners as
Hmm.
opposed to like their individual, right?
Correct.
Because let's say a person who may not have physical touch on their top
My
could
lord.
simply be that way. So it appears, and they individually, I could be like, that's not important to me when it actually is because it works with the others.
Hmm.
Like, I'm like, oh, this person wants me to spend time with them. Like, the quality time is important, but if they don't affirm me, and if every time we
Hmm.
get together, because we are in friendships sometimes where we don't say anything, like we
Hmm.
show up once a year to the party, but we don't say anything. Wherein it actually could work together if we realize, like, okay, quality time not doesn't just mean like, okay, I show up once a year for the big family function, but it means that like
I
quality
can't believe
time
you
is like
just.
us talking on the phone. And
Hmm.
because this is different, I'm going to invest once a week sending a text, or I'm going to invest once a month. We like talk for 2 hours on video or something like that. Because now that one that one love language then feeds over into
Mhm.
the quality of the time that we spend together because people
Right.
are spending time, but it's not full of quality. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I saw you, but we didn't talk about nothing. Or it was like, how you doing? Good. You? I'm fine. And that's it.
Uh-huh.
There's no depth to it. There's no like, you're like, oh, talked to Regina and it was like, yeah, it was very much touch and go. It wasn't
Mhm.
full of quality. So yeah, I think that that's like seeing those things together
Mhm.
versus these are isolated type things.
It's crazy that you use the whole example of, being seeing family only one time a year at a function.
Mhm.
That's one of my biggest challenges, because all of my cousins, when I go back home,
Mhm.
uh, it's always it's always the time when everybody comes together.
Mhm.
I'm like, some of them, especially if I go home in the summer and in the winter, and I see some of them, it's like, oh yeah, I seen so and so and so. Yeah, I was like, you mean I live in the United States, in Florida, and I've seen them more this year than you have, and y'all live 30 minutes apart. So that's I fuss every time I go home. I was like, man, y'all need to spend more time together. I'm the only cousin here. All the rest of y'all are up there, but they don't take the time to like, hey, let's do a cousin link up.
Mm,
Unless I'm home, and I'm like, hey man, we need to.
come together.
And we grew up that way. We was never like apart.
Oh,
No, all our aunts and uncles, we were there always. We was always having gatherings, 2, 3 times a month.
yeah. Hmm. This has been good. I
It
got,
has.
got some homework to do.
We do.
Yeah.
I do.
So thank you again for coming today.
Thank you for
I
having me.
appreciate this. And this was really good. Like I say, it's helped me kind of walk out some things for myself or acknowledge some things within myself to work on. And hopefully the people who listening to this will also see an opportunity in an area of growth for them. I like to, before we end, I like to like do a quote. And so the quote for our segment is the language of friendship is not words, but meaning.
One more time.
The language of friendship is not words, but meaning. So we talked about love languages
Mhm.
today, and we talk about. So for me, it makes me think about how the meaning of something is greater than just a word, right?
Gotcha.
So like when we talk about like words of affirmation, that's a word, that's a language, but the meaning of that has depth to it.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
There's a lot of there are several different definitions when it relates to friendships and love languages, and those
mhm,
definitions can change not only with individuals but with the friendships as well. But
mm,
it's about defining
yeah.
what those are.
Look
And
at
when
you.
we first starting is through conversation.
Right.
Friendships that flourish are never malnourished.
All right. So, as we conclude Friendships That Flourish, the podcast, we're reminded of the value of our authentic connections and how that is fostered in our lives, a sense of belonging. I want to encourage you that are listening to apply this conversation and something that you can take away from it this week to be better friends and to allow your friendships that currently exist to flourish. Thank you for listening. Again, you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Friendships That Flourish. And we appreciate you for listening. Bye. Thanks for listening to Friendships That Flourish, the podcast with your host, Regina Nicole. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms and be sure to listen to us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Don't forget to email us any of your topics and questions at friendsthatflourish@gmail.com.